They thought she was nothing more than a broke preschool teacher trying to fight a titan of industry. In courtroom 4B, the laughter was cruel and loud as the defense attorney waved her tax return in the air, mocking her meager $32,000 annual salary. Her ex-husband, a man who owned half the city's skyline, smirked, already celebrating his victory. He thought he was about to leave her penniless and broken, but he didn't know what was inside the battered leather briefcase she clutched to her chest. He didn't know that the quiet woman he'd tormented for years wasn't asking for his money, because she had just inherited an empire that could buy and sell him 10 times over. The fluorescent lights of the Superior Court of Manhattan buzzed with an irritating hum. But for Clara Bennett, the sound was drowned out by the droning, arrogant voice of Gavin Reed, her husband's lead counsel. Clara sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. She wore a simple grey suit she had bought off the rack at a department store 3 years ago. It was clean and pressed, but against the backdrop of the mahogany-panelled courtroom and the custom-tailored Italian wool suits of the opposing legal team, she looked small, insignificant. "Your Honor," Gavin Reed said, turning to the gallery as if he were performing Shakespeare rather than arguing a divorce settlement. He held up a single sheet of paper between his thumb and forefinger, treating it like a soiled tissue. "We are wasting the court's valuable time. Mrs. Bennett is requesting a spousal support sum that is frankly laughable. She claims she needs maintenance to survive, yet here we have her W-2 form from last year." Reed walked toward the judge, Judge Harrison, a stern man with thick spectacles who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. $32,400, Reed announced, his voice booming. "That is what Mrs. Bennett contributed to the marital assets last year. 32,000. A ripple of snickering moved through the benches behind the defense table. Clara didn't need to turn around to know who was laughing. It was Jared Montgomery's entourage, his assistants, his PR team, and his sycophants. Jared sat at the defense table, leaning back in his chair with an air of bored detachment. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Clara's entire yearly salary. He didn't look at her. He never looked at her anymore. To him, she was already a line item deleted from a spreadsheet. "My client," Reed continued, gesturing grandly to Jared, "generated $45 million in net revenue last quarter alone. The prenuptial agreement, which Mrs. Bennett signed willingly 5 years ago, clearly states that in the event of a divorce, she leaves with what she came with, which, based on this tax return, is effectively nothing." "Objection," Clara's lawyer, a weary public defender named Samuel West, said half-heartedly. "Relevance. My client's current income does not negate the emotional distress and the career sacrifices she made to support Mr. Montgomery's rise." "Sacrifices?" Reed scoffed, spinning around. "She was a preschool teacher when they met, and she is a preschool teacher now. Where is the sacrifice? She lived in a penthouse she didn't pay for, drove cars she didn't buy, and wore clothes she couldn't afford. The ride is simply over, Your Honor. It is time for Mrs. Bennett to return to her humble reality." Jared finally looked up. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Clara. His lips curled into a smirk that was terrifyingly familiar. It was the same look he gave her when he told her she was too stupid to understand his business deals, or when he made fun of her thrift store shoes in front of his wealthy friends at galas. "You are nothing," his eyes said, "and you will leave here with nothing." Clara felt a burning sensation behind her eyes, but she refused to cry. She had spent 5 years crying. She had cried when he forgot her birthday, cried when he stayed out all night with clients, and cried when he told her that he was filing for divorce because she didn't fit his brand anymore. But today, the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a strange, cold heat was spreading through her chest. It was the heat of a secret. Samuel West leaned over to her, whispering, "Clara, look, it's not going well. Reed is brutal, but he's right about the prenup. If we settle now, maybe I can get them to give you a one-time payment of 10 grand. Enough for a deposit on an apartment. If we keep fighting, Judge Harrison might make you pay Jared's legal fees." Clara looked at Samuel. He was a good man, overworked and underpaid, trying to fight a shark with a plastic spoon. He didn't know. She hadn't told him yet. "No settlement, Samuel," Clara said, her voice soft but steady. Samuel blinked, surprised by her tone. "Clara, be reasonable. They are mocking you. They are dragging your financial dignity through the mud. Do you really want to endure another hour of this?" "Let them talk," Clara said, her gaze fixed on Gavin Reed, who was now making a joke about how Clara probably couldn't afford the bus fare home. "Let them say everything they have to say. I want it all on the record." Reed was on a roll now. "Your Honor, requesting $2 million in settlement from Mr. Montgomery is not just greed. It is delusion. This woman has no concept of wealth management. Giving her that kind of money would be like handing a machine gun to a toddler. She belongs in her classroom, wiping noses, not in the circles of high finance." Judge Harrison took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Reed, tone down the theatrics, but the point is taken. Mrs. Bennett, unless you have substantial evidence to challenge the validity of the prenuptial agreement, I am inclined to rule in favor of the defendant immediately." The courtroom went silent. Jared Montgomery stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He thought it was over. He walked over to Clara's table, leaning down just close enough that only she could hear him. "You should have taken the 10 grand I offered you last month," Jared whispered, his breath smelling of expensive peppermints. "Now you're going to be living in a box. Maybe I'll drive by and toss a quarter in your cup." Clara looked up at him. For the first time in years, she didn't flinch. She slowly reached down to the battered leather bag at her feet. "You're right, Jared," she said, her voice clear enough for the stenographer to hear. "I don't want your money. I really don't." She placed the bag on the table. The rusted buckle clicked loudly in the silence. To understand why Clara Bennett was sitting in that courtroom, enduring the humiliation of 1,000 cuts, one had to look back 5 years. Clara hadn't always been a humble preschool teacher in the way Jared mocked. She came from a small town in Oregon, the daughter of a mechanic and a diner waitress. She had worked 3 jobs to put herself through college. She met Jared Montgomery at a charity fundraiser she had volunteered for. Back then, Jared wasn't the real estate mogul he was today. He was hungry, ambitious, and charming. He swept Clara off her feet, telling her that her kindness was a grounding force for him. He told her he needed someone real in a world of fakes. But the moment the ring was on her finger, the dynamic shifted. Jared's business, Montgomery Holdings, exploded in value after a risky acquisition of a tech park in Austin. Suddenly, he was worth $50 million, then 100. The money rotted him from the inside out. He began to treat Clara like an accessory that didn't quite match his new outfit. He forced her to sign a post-nuptial agreement 2 years into the marriage, threatening to leave her if she didn't prove she wasn't a gold digger. Terrified of losing the man she thought she loved, she signed it. The agreement was draconian. It stated that all assets acquired during the marriage remained sole property of the earner. Since Jared earned the millions and Clara earned a teacher's salary, it meant he owned everything. But there was a clause. A tiny, insignificant clause buried on page 42, section C, paragraph 4. The external beneficiary clause. It was standard legal boilerplate, inserted by Jared's lawyers to protect him. It stated, "Any inheritance, windfall, or external financial gain acquired by either party during the separation period, but prior to the finalization of divorce, shall be disclosed. However, if said assets exceed the total marital value by a factor of 10, the party holding said assets reserves the right to annul all prior financial dependencies and countersue for defamation if financial incompetence was alleged." Jared's lawyers had put it there, thinking Jared might inherit his aunt's estate and wanted to make sure Clara couldn't touch it. They never in a million years imagined the shoe would be on the other foot. Why? Because Clara was a nobody. She had no rich relatives. Her parents were passed on, leaving her nothing but debt and a box of old photos, or so Jared thought. Clara unzipped the leather bag on the courtroom table. Her hands were steady now. She remembered the phone call she had received 3 weeks ago. It wasn't from a family member. It was from a law firm in Zurich, Switzerland, the firm of Richter and König. The voice on the other end had been an elderly man named Heinrich. "Mrs. Bennet," he had said, "we have been looking for you for a very long time. It concerns your biological grandfather." Clara had been confused. "My grandfather was a mechanic in Oregon." "No, my dear," Heinrich had corrected gently. "That was the man who raised your father. Your biological grandfather was a man named Tobias Vance." The name meant nothing to her at the time, but a quick Google search had nearly stopped her heart. Tobias Vance was an industrialist, a recluse, and one of the largest private landholders in Europe and North America. He had died without recognized children, or so everyone thought. It turned out Clara's father was an illegitimate child Tobias had fathered during a brief affair in the 1970s. Tobias had kept tabs on him, and subsequently on Clara. He had watched her struggle, watched her work, and watched her marry Jared. Tobias hadn't liked Jared. In his will, Tobias had left a specific instruction. "The inheritance is to be released to my granddaughter, Clara, only when she proves she is ready to stand on her own, or when she faces a crisis of character." The divorce was that crisis. Clara pulled a thick blue folder from her bag. It wasn't a W-2 form. It was a bound document with the gold-embossed seal of the Swiss Banking Commission. "Mr. Reed," Clara said, interrupting the lawyer who was busy packing his briefcase, assuming the win. "Before you ask the judge to dismiss my case, I would like to submit one final piece of evidence regarding my financial incompetence." Jared laughed, a dry, barking sound. "What is it, Clara? A coupon for a free sandwich? Seriously, give it up." "No, Jared," Clara said, standing up. She looked taller now. "It's a disclosure of assets, per the external beneficiary clause in the prenup you forced me to sign." Judge Harrison looked intrigued. "Approach the bench, Mrs. Bennet." Clara walked past Jared. She could smell his expensive cologne, a scent that used to make her feel safe, but now just smelled like arrogance. She handed the blue folder to the judge. "What is this?" Judge Harrison asked, opening the cover. He adjusted his glasses. He squinted. Then he stopped moving. The courtroom was silent. The judge turned the page. Then another. His eyes widened. He looked up at Clara, then down at the paper, then back at Clara. "Mrs. Bennet," the judge said, his voice trembling slightly. "Is this authenticated?" "Yes, Your Honor," Clara said. "The representatives from Richter and König are actually waiting in the hallway. They flew in from Zurich this morning." "What is going on?" Gavin Reed demanded, stepping forward, annoyed. "Judge, I object to this ambush. What piece of trash is she showing you?" Judge Harrison looked at Gavin Reed with a look of pure incredulity. "Mr. Reed," the judge said, his voice dropping to a hush that echoed louder than a scream, "you just argued that Mrs. Bennett's $32,000 salary makes her financially incompetent." "And I stand by that," Reed said. "Well," the judge said, closing the folder and placing it gently on his desk, as if it were a bomb, "it appears that, as of last Tuesday, Mrs. Bennett became the sole beneficiary of the Vance Estate Trust." Jared rolled his eyes. "So, what is that? 100 grand? Good for her. She can pay her own rent." The judge looked at Jared. "Mr. Montgomery, the current valuation of the assets listed here, including liquid capital, real estate holdings in London and New York, and a majority share in clean energy patents, is listed at $4.2 billion. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. Jared's smirk froze. It didn't fade. It just stuck there, like a glitch in a video file. "I'm sorry, I thought you said billion." "With a B," the judge clarified. "And according to the prenuptial agreement you wrote, Mr. Reed, since her assets exceed the marital value by a factor of 10, she is invoking the annulment clause." Clara turned to Jared. The color had drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure. "I don't need your $2 million, Jared," Clara said softly, "but I am going to buy the building your office is in. And I think I'm going to raise the rent." The silence in courtroom 4B didn't last. It was shattered by the frantic whispering of Gavin Reed, who was scrambling to grab the blue folder from the judge's bench. This has to be a mistake," Reed stammered, his face flushing a deep, unhealthy red. "Tobias Vance? The Vance estate? That man has been a ghost for 30 years. There is no way this preschool teacher is related to him." "Watch your tone, counselor," Judge Harrison snapped, snatching the folder back. "The documentation is impeccable. Birth certificates, DNA verification from a neutral lab in Geneva, and the executed will. It's all here. And Mr. Reed, you might want to stop insulting the wealthiest woman in this room." Jared Montgomery was still frozen in his chair. The arrogance that usually radiated from him had evaporated, replaced by a dawn of sheer terror. He was a businessman. He understood leverage, and he knew, with a sickening clarity, that he had just handed his ex-wife the ultimate weapon. He stood up, his legs wobbling slightly. He tried to summon the charm that had won him so many deals, the smile that had fooled Clara 5 years ago. "Clara," Jared said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again, smoother this time. "Clara, honey, look at me." Clara turned slowly. She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized with a jolt that she felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just the indifference one feels for a stranger on a bus. "I'm not your honey, Jared," she said. "I'm the defendant, remember." "This is crazy," Jared said, walking around the table, ignoring his lawyer's hissed warnings to sit down. "Why didn't you tell me? We're partners. We've always been partners. If you have this burden of wealth, I can help you manage it. You know I can. I have the infrastructure. We can combine our assets. Think of what we could build." The audacity was breathtaking. Even the court stenographer stopped typing, her mouth slightly open. Clara laughed. It was a genuine, light sound. "Combine our assets. Jared, 10 minutes ago, you were arguing that I wasn't worth the price of a used car. You said giving me money was like handing a machine gun to a toddler. That was legal strategy," Jared pleaded, reaching out to touch her arm. Clara stepped back. "Don't touch me." "Clara, please. The prenup. We can tear it up. We can start over." "Oh, we are definitely tearing it up," Clara said, her eyes cold. "Because the annulment clause you put in allows me to void the financial separation if the disparity is this large. But it also allows me to countersue for damages." "Damages?" Reed squawked. "What damages?" Clara looked at the judge. "Your Honor, for the last 3 years, Mr. Montgomery has used company funds that would have been marital assets without the prenup, to sabotage my reputation. He blacklisted me from teaching at 3 private schools. He spread rumors that I was mentally unstable. He did this to ensure I would never have the resources to fight him in court." She pointed to the blue folder. "But now I have the resources. I have infinite resources. And I intend to audit every single penny Montgomery Holdings has spent since the day we were married." Jared's face went white. An audit. A forensic audit funded by Billionaire Capital. It would uncover everything. The offshore accounts in the Caymans, the bribes to zoning commissioners, the falsified construction reports. "You can't do that," Jared whispered. "Watch me," Clara said. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Order. This hearing is recessed. Mr. Reed, I suggest you and your client take a very long lunch break and decide how you want to proceed. Because right now, it looks like Ms. Vance, is holding all the cards." As Clara turned to leave, the heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open. 2 men in immaculate charcoal suits walked in. They moved with the silent precision of people who cost $1,000 an hour. "Mrs. Bennett?" the taller one said with a German accent. "I am Lucas, from Richter and Koenig. The car is waiting." "Thank you, Lucas," Clara said. She grabbed her battered leather bag. As she walked past Jared, she didn't even glance at him. He was just a ghost in the room. The news hit the internet before Clara even made it to the hotel. Preschool teacher, secret billionaire, Montgomery divorce implodes. By the time Clara arrived at the Pierre Hotel, where the Swiss legal team had set up a temporary command center, her phone was vibrating so hard it fell off the car seat. Every news outlet from CNN to TMZ was trying to reach her. But Clara had work to do. She sat at the head of a long glass table in the penthouse suite. Lucas and his team had already laid out the strategy. "The inheritance is fully liquid," Lucas explained, sliding a tablet across the table. "Your grandfather, Tobias, did not trust the stock market in his later years. He converted almost everything into gold, land, and direct ownership of utility grids. You are, effectively, one of the most powerful independent operators in New York City right now." Clara looked at the numbers. It was dizzying, but she forced herself to focus. "I don't care about the yachts or the jets, Lucas. I want to know about Montgomery Holdings." Lucas smiled. It was a predatory smile. "We anticipated this. While you were in court, our analysts were busy. Jared Montgomery is over-leveraged. He borrowed heavily to build his new flagship tower, the Montgomery Spire. The loans are due in 6 months. If he doesn't secure refinancing, he goes bankrupt." "Who holds the debt?" Clara asked. "A consortium of 3 regional banks," Lucas said. "Mid-tier banks. They are nervous. They've heard the rumors about the divorce and the potential audit." "Buy the debt," Clara said instantly. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "All of it?" "Every cent," Clara said. "I want to be the one he owes money to." "That will cost roughly $400 million, Lucas noted. "It is a significant portion of your liquid cash." "Do it," Clara said. "And one more thing. Who owns the building where his headquarters is located? The one I mentioned in court?" "That is owned by a holding company called Apex Realty." "Buy the building," Clara commanded. "I want to be his landlord and his banker." The next 48 hours were a blur of contracts and wire transfers. Clara didn't sleep. She was fueled by adrenaline and a lifetime of being told she wasn't good enough. She wasn't doing this for revenge, or at least, that's what she told herself. She was doing it for justice. Jared had destroyed dozens of small contractors who worked for him. He had ruined lives. She was just the karma that was finally catching up. 2 days later, Jared Montgomery sat in his corner office on the 40th floor, staring out at the city. His lawyer, Gavin Reed, was pacing the floor, looking disheveled. "We can fight the audit," Reed was saying. "We can delay it for years. We'll bury them in paperwork." "She has billions, Gavin!" Jared shouted, throwing a crystal paperweight across the room. It shattered against the wall. "She can hire more lawyers than we have employees. She doesn't care about the money. She wants me." His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Montgomery, there is a delegation here to see you." "I'm not seeing anyone. Tell the press to go to hell." "It's not the press, sir." The secretary's voice trembled. "It's the new owners of the building." Jared froze. New owners? Apex Realty never sells. The doors to his office opened. Clara walked in. She wasn't wearing the grey department store suit anymore. She was wearing a tailored white blazer and trousers that looked like they had been cut from liquid silk. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. She looked like a queen. Behind her were Lucas and 2 large security guards. "Clara," Jared breathed, "what are you doing here?" "Inspecting my property," Clara said, walking over to the window. She looked out at the view, the same view Jared used to intimidate his enemies. "It's a nice view, a bit cliched, but nice." You bought the building?" Gavin Reed asked, his jaw dropping. "I did," Clara said. "And I bought your debt, Jared." She tossed a file onto his desk. "The construction loans for the Spire, the bridge loans for your lifestyle, the mortgage on your Hamptons house. I own it all. Richter and Koenig acquired the debt packages this morning." Jared looked at the file. He felt like he was going to vomit. "So, what? You're going to foreclose on me?" "Not yet," Clara said calmly. "I'm calling the loans. You have 30 days to pay me back in full. $412 million. If you can't, I take everything. The company, the Spire, the name." "30 days," Jared screamed. "That's impossible. No one can raise that kind of liquid cash in 30 days. "I did," Clara said simply. She leaned over the desk, her face inches from his. "You told me I needed to learn about the real world, Jared. You told me I was too soft. Well, welcome to the real world. In the real world, when you owe money to the bank owns you, and I am the bank." "Clara, please," Jared whimpered. He was crying now, actual tears. "I built this company from nothing." "No, you didn't," Clara said. "You built it on my credit score when we first started. You built it on the backs of unpaid contractors. And you built it on lies. I'm just balancing the books." She turned to leave. 30 days, Jared. Tick-tock." As she walked toward the elevator, Gavin Reed ran after her. "Mrs. Bennett! Miss Vance!" he called out. "Surely we can come to an arrangement. A settlement?" Clara stopped and looked at the lawyer who had mocked her salary just days ago. "Mr. Reed," she said coolly, "you called my salary laughable. Do you know what I find laughable? Your retainer. Because once Jared goes bankrupt, I doubt he'll be able to pay your final bill. I'd start updating your resume if I were you." She stepped into the elevator and the doors closed, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. The clock was ticking. 7 days had passed since Clara's ultimatum, and Jared Montgomery was a man drowning in slow motion. The financial world, once his playground, had turned into a fortress with the gates barred shut. He had called every contact in his Rolodex. He had called the CEOs he played golf with, the hedge fund managers he partied with in St. Bart's, and even the loan sharks he swore he'd never touch. The answer was always the same. "Sorry, Jared, you're radioactive. We can't go up against the estate." Clara, or rather, the immense gravity of the Tobias Trust, had effectively blacklisted him from the global banking system. Desperation drove Jared to a place he never thought he'd visit, a nondescript, brick industrial building in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. There was no signage, just a heavy steel door and a security camera that tracked his every movement. He was there to see Donovan Cross. In the whispers of New York's elite, Donovan Cross didn't exist. He wasn't on the Forbes list. He didn't attend the Met Gala. But if you needed a competitor's warehouse to burn down accidentally, or a senator to change his vote because of newly discovered photos, you called Cross. He was a corporate cleaner, a man who fixed problems that couldn't be solved legally. Jared sat in a lone metal chair in the center of a dimly lit room. The air smelled of ozone and stale cigars. "You look terrible, Montgomery," a voice echoed from the shadows. Donovan Cross stepped into the light. He was a man of indeterminate age, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that looked like shattered glass. He wore a suit that cost more than Jared's car, but he wore it carelessly, like a man who had transcended the need to impress anyone. "I need money," Jared said, his voice raspy. $400 million. I need to pay her off." Cross chuckled, a dry sound like leaves crunching. "I don't lend money, Jared. I'm not a bank. Banks have rules. I have interests." "I can give you equity," Jared pleaded. 30% of Montgomery Holdings. Once I pay her off, I'll be back on top. The Spire will generate billions." "The Spire is a glass phallus built on a swamp of debt," Cross said dismissively. "I don't want your company. It's worthless, but I am interested in her." Jared frowned. "Clara Bennett, the preschool teacher who inherited the earth," Cross said, circling Jared like a shark. "Do you know who Tobias was? He was a rival of my father's, a bitter rival. That old man locked up immense mining rights in South America that my family has been trying to access for 50 years. Now this girl holds the keys." Cross stopped in front of Jared. "I won't give you the money to pay her. That's boring. I will help you destroy her. If she is incapacitated or imprisoned or declared mentally unfit, the trust freezes. And if you, as the grieving ex-husband, can prove she was unstable, you might just become the conservator of the estate." Jared's heart hammered against his ribs. It was evil. It was illegal. It was exactly what he wanted to hear. "How?" Jared whispered. "We don't attack the money," Cross said smoothly. "We attack the narrative. We make the world believe that the inheritance is a delusion, a forgery created by a desperate, scorned woman. But the lawyers, the DNA, lawyers can be bought. DNA labs can have contamination issues." Cross smiled, revealing teeth that looked too white in the gloom. "I have a contact at the Swiss Records Office. For the right price, we can make the original will disappear. We can replace it with a document that shows Tobias left everything to a cat charity. Then we plant evidence in Clara's apartment, forgery tools, a printer, emails to a counterfeiter." Jared felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. "If we get caught—" "We won't," Cross assured him. "But you have to do your part. You have to provoke her. Make her look angry in public. Make her look crazy. Can you do that?" Jared thought about the way Clara had looked at him in the office. Cool, detached, superior. He hated her for it. He wanted to see her break. "Yes," Jared said, a cruel smile forming. "I can do that." 3 days later, Clara stood on the steps of the New York Public Library. She was announcing the launch of the Bennett Tobias Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to funding literacy programs in underprivileged districts. The press was there in swarms. Clara felt a strange sense of calm. She had spent the last week meeting with financial advisors from Goldman Sachs and legal experts from Skadden Arps, learning the ropes of her new reality. She realized that money wasn't just currency, it was a shield. "My grandfather believed that knowledge was the only true wealth," Clara said into the microphone, her voice projecting strength. "And today, I am pledging $50 million to ensure every child in this city has access to that wealth." Applause rippled through the crowd. Lucas, standing near the security detail, gave her a proud nod. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. "Liar!" a voice screamed. Jared burst through the line of reporters. He looked disheveled, his shirt unbuttoned, his eyes wild. He was playing the part Donovan Cross had scripted for him perfectly. The victim, the man pushed too far. "She's a fraud," Jared yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Clara. "That money isn't hers. She forged it all. She's sick." Security guards moved to intercept him, but Clara raised a hand. "Let him speak." Jared stumbled forward, panting. Cameras flashed blindingly. "You think she's a saint? She's been obsessed with money since the day I met her. She fabricated the whole thing. The Swiss lawyers, actors, the will, a printout she made in our basement. I have proof." He pulled a crumpled stack of papers from his jacket. "I found these in her old desk. Practice signatures. She's been practicing Tobias's signature for years." The crowd gasped. The reporters turned their cameras on Clara, hungry for the scandal. "Jared," Clara said, her voice dropping to a disappointed sigh. "Is this really the best you could come up with?" "You're going to jail, Clara!" Jared screamed, foaming slightly at the mouth. "The FBI is on their way to your penthouse right now. They're going to find the printer. They're going to find the special paper." Clara froze. The penthouse. She hadn't been to the penthouse in 2 days. She had been staying at the Pierre. But her staff was there. "Lucas!" Clara said sharply, turning to her attorney. Lucas was already on his phone, his face grim. He covered the receiver. "Clara, the NYPD is executing a search warrant at your residence. An anonymous tip about international wire fraud and forgery." It was a setup, a classic, brutal frame-up. If they found whatever Jared and his new partner had planted, Clara would be arrested. The headlines would destroy her credibility. The assets would be frozen during the investigation, which could take years. Jared would win by attrition. Jared saw the look on her face and grinned. "Tick-tock, Clara. Looks like your time is up." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The press pack was frenzying, shouting questions. "Is it true, Miss Bennett? Did you forge the will?" Clara closed her eyes for a second. She breathed in. She thought of her classroom. She thought of the kids who had nothing, who had to fight for every scrap of dignity. She wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting for the truth. She opened her eyes and looked directly into the nearest camera lens. "Everyone, please stay where you are," Clara said, her voice amplified by the speakers, cutting through the noise. "Mr. Montgomery seems to think he has caught me in a lie." But he forgot one thing. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and held it up. "Lucas, connect to the main screen, please," she commanded. Behind her, the large digital display that had been showing the Foundation's logo flickered and changed. It showed a live video feed. It was a black-and-white security camera view, but it wasn't from the library. It was from the interior of Clara's penthouse. Jared's smile faltered. "You see," Clara said to the crowd, "when I inherited the estate, the head of security for the Tobias Trust, a former Mossad agent named Eitan, insisted on upgrading the surveillance in my home. He installed hidden cameras that don't just record motion, they record to a cloud server that no one can delete." On the giant screen, the timestamp showed yesterday, 3:00 a.m. The video showed a window being jimmied open. A figure dressed in black climbed into Clara's study. The figure moved to the desk, planted a high-end laser printer, and stuffed a sheaf of papers into the drawers. Then the figure turned. The mask slipped slightly. It wasn't Jared. It was a man with a distinct scar on his neck. "That man," Clara said, pointing at the screen, "is an associate of Mr. Donovan Cross, a known corporate saboteur." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. "And," Clara continued, swiping to the next video file, "here is the audio recording from the restaurant Le Bernardin 3 nights ago. Table 4. The screen went black, but audio played. It was crystal clear. Cross's voice. "We plant the evidence. We call the FBI. She gets arrested for fraud." Jared's voice. "I want to see her in handcuffs, Donovan. I want to see her beg." The silence in the plaza was absolute. Clara looked down at Jared. He was shaking, but not with anger anymore. With terror. "You tried to frame me for forgery, Jared," Clara said. "But you just confessed to conspiracy and filing a false police report on a global live stream." She pointed to the police cars screeching to a halt at the bottom of the steps. "I don't think they're here for me," Clara said. 2 FBI agents, accompanied by NYPD officers, marched up the stairs. They didn't look at Clara. They walked straight to Jared Montgomery. "Jared Montgomery," the lead agent barked, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, and corporate espionage." As the handcuffs clicked around Jared's wrists, he looked at Clara one last time. He looked small, broken. "Clara," he whimpered. Clara turned her back on him and faced the crowd. "Now," she said, her voice steady, "does anyone have any questions about the literacy program?" The flashbulbs that had blinded Clara on the steps of the library eventually faded, but the spotlight on her life was just beginning to intensify. In the 48 hours following Jared Montgomery's arrest, the narrative of New York City's social hierarchy was rewritten. The video of Jared's confession and the subsequent footage of him being shoved into the back of an FBI cruiser had been viewed 300 million times. It was a moment of cultural catharsis. The arrogant titan had fallen, and the quiet teacher had risen. But for Clara, the victory wasn't in the viral fame. It was in the silence that followed. She sat in the back of her armored SUV as it navigated the rainy streets of Manhattan. Lucas sat opposite her, reviewing a thick stack of documents. "The board of directors at Montgomery Holdings has formally resigned," Lucas said, not looking up. "All of them. They are terrified of RICO charges. You are now, effectively, the sole decision-maker for the entire conglomerate." Clara looked out the window at the blurred city lights. "And Gavin Reed?" Lucas allowed himself a rare, dry chuckle. Mr. Reed attempted to turn state's witness against Jared to save his own license. The district attorney declined the offer. "It seems they have enough evidence without him. Mr. Reed is currently being sued by 3 former clients for malpractice. He will likely be disbarred by Christmas." "Good," Clara said softly. "Drive us to the tower, please." The hostile takeover. The lobby of the Montgomery Spire, now legally the Vance Bennett building, though the signage hadn't been changed yet, was a mausoleum of nervous energy. Security guards who had once sneered at Clara when she brought Jared his lunch now stood at rigid attention, sweating. Clara walked through the turnstiles, her heels clicking on the marble with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. She took the private elevator to the 40th floor. When the doors opened, the staff was waiting. These were the people who had enabled Jared, the vice presidents who laughed at his misogynistic jokes, the HR directors who silenced the secretaries he harassed. They stood in a line, looking like prisoners awaiting a firing squad. Clara walked to the head of the conference room table, Jared's table, and placed her bag down. She didn't sit. "I'm not going to make a speech," Clara said, her voice projecting clearly without raising a decibel, "and I'm not going to fire everyone." A collective exhale went through the room. "However," she continued, her eyes sharpening, "I have reviewed the payroll. I have reviewed the HR complaints, and I have reviewed the project files." She pointed to the VP of Operations, a man named Sterling, who had once told Clara she wasn't smart enough to understand a spreadsheet. "Mr. Sterling," Clara said, "pack your things. Your severance package has been denied due to gross negligence found in the audit. Security will escort you out." Sterling turned purple. "You can't do this. I know where the bodies are buried." "I don't care about the bodies," Clara said coldly. "I own the cemetery. Get out." As Sterling was dragged away, Clara turned to a young woman in the back of the room. It was Sarah, a junior analyst who Clara remembered. Sarah was the one who actually did the work while Jared took the credit. Sarah had once helped Clara pick up papers she dropped in the hallway when everyone else stepped over them. "Sarah?" Clara asked. The young woman jumped. "Yes, Miss Vance?" "You're the interim CEO," Clara said. The room gasped. Sarah's eyes went wide. "Me? But I'm 26. You're the only person in this room who knows how the logistics software actually works," Clara said. "And you're the only person here who ever treated me like a human being. The salary is $400,000 a year, plus stock options. Do you accept?" Sarah stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes. Yes, I do." "Good," Clara said, picking up her bag. "Clean this place up. I want this company focusing on affordable housing and green infrastructure by the end of the quarter. If anyone gives you trouble, call me." Clara walked out. She didn't look back. She had just dismantled a toxic patriarchy and replaced it with meritocracy in under 5 minutes. It was the most satisfying moment of her life. The fall of the king 6 months later, the trial of the people versus Jared Montgomery concluded. It wasn't the sensational circus Jared had hoped for. He had tried to play the victim, claiming he was coerced by Donovan Cross. But the audio recordings were damning. Donovan Cross, a ghost of a man, had vanished into the wind, likely to a non-extradition country, leaving Jared to hold the bag. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, witness tampering. Jared was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The judge, in a twist of irony, was Judge Harrison, the same judge from the divorce hearing. He made a point of noting that Jared's arrogance was not a defense. The prison visit. A year passed. Clara's life had settled into a new, vibrant rhythm. She wasn't just a philanthropist, she was a force of nature. She had opened 10 literacy centers. She had funded a legal defense fund for women going through abusive divorces. She was dating again, a kind architect named Julian, who didn't care about her money and preferred hiking to galas. But there was one loose thread. On a grey Tuesday in November, Clara's car pulled up to the gates of the Otisville Federal Correctional Institution. She sat in the visitation room, behind the thick plexiglass. The room smelled of bleach and despair. When Jared walked in, Clara almost didn't recognize him. The Italian suits were gone, replaced by a drab khaki jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and grey. But it was his eyes that were different. The spark of superiority was gone, replaced by a dull, hollow confusion. He sat down and picked up the phone. Clara did the same. "You came," Jared said. His voice was scratchy. "You put me on the visitation list every week for a year, Jared," Clara said. "I figured I'd come once to make you stop." Jared looked down at his hands. "It's hard in here, Clara. The food, the noise. I don't belong here." "You committed felonies, Jared," Clara said. "This is exactly where you belong." "I was desperate," Jared snapped, a flash of his old self appearing. "I was losing everything. You have to understand, being poor, it terrified me. I couldn't go back to being a nobody." Clara looked at him with genuine pity. "That's the difference between us, Jared. You thought money made you somebody. You thought the suits and the penthouse were who you were. So when you lost them, you ceased to exist." She leaned closer to the glass. "I was a preschool teacher making $30,000 a year," she said. "And I was more of a person then than you ever were with your millions. I didn't need the inheritance to be worthy of respect. I just needed it to get you off my back." Jared wiped his nose. Can you put some money on my commissary books? Please? I need things. Hygiene products. Better food." It was pathetic. The man who had mocked her for needing maintenance was now begging for toothpaste money. Clara reached into her purse. She pulled out a small slip of paper. It wasn't a check. "Do you remember the day of the divorce hearing?" Clara asked. "You told me you'd toss a quarter in my cup if you saw me on the street." Jared flinched. "I'm not going to give you money, Jared," Clara said. "But I did something else. I set up a trust for your parents." Jared's head snapped up. "My parents? They were losing their house because you stopped paying their mortgage when the assets were frozen," Clara explained. "They're good people. They didn't deserve to suffer for your crimes. I paid off their house. I made sure they have a monthly stipend for groceries and medicine." Jared stared at her, his mouth slightly open. He couldn't process it. Why would she help the parents of the man who tried to destroy her? "Why?" he whispered. "Because I'm not you," Clara said, standing up. "And because I wanted you to know, every single day you sit in this cell, that the woman you called worthless is taking care of the family you abandoned." She hung up the phone. "Clara!" Jared yelled, banging his fist against the glass. "Clara, wait! I'm sorry! Clara didn't turn around. She walked out of the prison, through the heavy steel doors, and into the crisp autumn air. The final lesson. The wind was blowing leaves across the pavement. Julian was waiting for her by the car, holding 2 coffees. "You okay?" he asked, handing her a cup. Clara took a sip. It was warm and sweet. "Yeah, I'm okay. Did you get closure?" "I realized I didn't need it," Clara said. "He's just a memory now, a lesson I had to learn." She looked at her reflection in the car window. She didn't see a billionaire. She didn't see a victim. She saw Clara. "What do you want to do now?" Julian asked. Clara smiled. She thought about the meeting she had scheduled for tomorrow. She was buying the preschool where she used to work. She wasn't going to turn it into condos. She was going to renovate it, double the teachers' salaries, and make it the best early learning center in the state. "I want to go to work," Clara said. She got into the car, and they drove away, leaving the prison and the past in the rearview mirror, shrinking until they disappeared completely. The inheritance had changed her bank account, but it hadn't changed her heart. And that, she realized, was the only wealth that no judge, no lawyer, and no ex-husband could ever take away. So, that is the story of Clara Bennett. She proved that dignity has no price tag and that the loudest person in the room is often the weakest. Jared Montgomery thought he was playing a game of chess with a pawn, but he never checked to see if she was actually the queen in disguise. In the end, his greed built his prison, while her kindness built her legacy. It's a powerful reminder that you should never underestimate someone based on their paycheck, because you never know what kind of power or inheritance they might be hiding in a battered leather bag. If this story of the underdog coming out on top made your day a little better, please go ahead and smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm find other people who need a little bit of justice in their lives. And if you are new here, welcome to the channel. We tell stories about karma, revenge, and people getting exactly what they deserve. If that sounds like your cup of tea, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We post new drama stories every single week. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Remember, be kind to people, because you never know who you are actually talking to. They might just be the owner of the building you're standing in. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.